Okay, so we knew where the auditions were. We had money set aside. We bought airplane tickets. We got a hotel room, and then we get on the airplane and we arrive at the auditions, which was not easy. I did not know how to drive in LA, and we were driving around for hours, and a couple of hours it took me to find the place. I ended up waiting in a line for a long time, which turned out to be a line for people getting citizenship in LA. Not the line that I wanted to be in. So I don't know, maybe there's a lesson in that sometimes you're standing in the wrong line. Actually, there is a lesson in that, because when I was starting out as a writer, I didn't know what I was good at writing. I talk about this sometimes, that one of the problems of becoming a writer is just because you like reading a lot of different genres does not mean that you are going to be suited to writing in those genres. And as a writer yourself, you may not be able to tell what genres you are suited to writing in. Just because you enjoy writing them doesn't mean you're good at it. You need feedback from other people to tell you, this is not really the direction for you. You may be just, like my first novel that's published is actually a contemporary novel, and I think I did a fine job. It's decent work. I'm not at all embarrassed about it. It's a good book, but I don't think it's shown. It wasn't like, oh yeah, this writer's so unique. But when I wrote my first fantasy, Mirror Mirror, about the Snow White fairy tale, but it's so weird and twisted, and it's about what happens to the mirror and the queen, like before Snow White ever comes on the stage, and then I don't talk about Snow White really more than one sentence, and then everything else happens 100 years after the evil queen is dead. And when people read it, inevitably I get the response of like, wow, that is really original. And you want to have that. So if you're waiting in the wrong line, you may be in for a really long wait. So I was trying to publish contemporary fiction for a long time. I did eventually get The Monster in Me published, but I think if I hadn't realized that I was waiting in the wrong line and that I should have been in the fantasy line, it might have been a shorter wait. But I don't know how you find out that except by some experience. So yeah, so we finally got in the right line, and we went to this gigantic building, and there's this line outside the building, and we get in the line, and we wait for about an hour, and then somebody comes up and says, okay, it's time to go into the building. So we walked over, and the camera started shooting everybody, and they had this woman come out who was, I guess, in charge of hyping us all up, and people were holding signs, what we're supposed to be shouting, and they're trying to crowd us all into this tiny, tiny space. Obviously, this was because they were going to be shooting this film for, the episode on the LA auditions, and they wanted it to look like there was a massive, massive number of people. If you've ever seen American Idol or any of the audition shows, they always do this long camera angle to make it look like there's 50 billion people waiting in line. They really fake a lot of that. So we were smashed into this, and we were all excited, and they're like, just 1 minute, you guys are going to be going in there, and yeah, so we were all shouting and everything, and then when they were done filming, then they said, okay, everybody get back in line. So yeah, then we got back in line. And we waited in this first line, and the first line that you wait in is to get your number. So you wait in the line to get your number, and that allows you then to wait in the line of the people who have numbers. And this is like writing in that writing for many people feels like a series of lines. And I should say that you might as well get used to waiting in line, because it doesn't end when you get your first book published. I know that many beginning writers believe that if only they get their first book published, then they will never have to wait in a line again. This is untrue. Every professional writer that I know, even New York Times best-selling writers, Shannon Hale, Holly Black, Libba Bray, they all have to wait in line over and over again. And by waiting in line, I mean they have to write a manuscript first. None of those writers that I've just listed are writers where the publisher will give them money in advance for anything they care to write. They have to write the manuscript first. Sometimes they can get away with writing a partial and a proposal, like a summary of it, but they have to do quite a bit of the work up front, and then they have to wait for the editors to read it. Sometimes their agent will send it out to multiple editors, but they are going to be waiting in line to see, which editors are interested. And once you get an editor interested. So you're waiting in this line for a number, and then when you've got a number, you get to go and wait in the next line. And the next line is the line to be allowed into the waiting room. I'm dead serious. So we waited another 4 hours after we got our number to be allowed to sit in the waiting room. Now, the advantage of being in the waiting room was that they had film crew going around in the waiting room. So if you were doing interesting things in the waiting room, there was a potential that the film crew might come over and interview you. And in fact, one woman who was sitting next to us, I think she did actually end up being on the show. She did animal sounds. This was, if you go back years ago, this is 2008. The woman doing animal sounds at the LA audition, we were sitting right next to her. And the interesting thing to me was, at these auditions, the editor would roll the tape, and she would talk for a while, and he would say, okay, stop. And then he would say, okay, let's do this again, and this is what I want you to say. And they would redo it over and over again until she said it quickly enough and in the way that the editor wanted it said in order for him to be able to put it on TV. But the idea that she had all these ideas all herself about what to say, it was false. She was pretty much told what to say. Maybe some part of it was original. So as a writer, you're going into this waiting room. And I think that is, for a lot of writers, after you finished your manuscript, you're so excited because you finally have an agent. Like getting a number in these audition lines is like getting an agent. That means you have the special privilege of going into the waiting room. The waiting room of waiting to be published. And it's a big step. I mean, it is really important, and people wait a long time to get into that waiting room, but it's not actually being published. And it can be disappointing if you imagine that as soon as you get an agent, you will automatically be published. I know many, many authors who signed with an agent and 2 years later have still not published a book. This doesn't really mean anything about them as authors. It just means that the agent can't sell that book for whatever reason. The marketplace, the editors are not looking for that kind of book. It doesn't mean that the book isn't a good book. It just means that it's not selling right now. And if you, as an author, are in that waiting room and all you're doing is twiddling your thumbs for the 2 years that you're in that waiting room, you're going to be pretty sad because after the 2 years, your agent will likely come to you and say, what else do you have? We need to send something else out. So in essence, it's going to feel a little bit like you're going back even further in line. You have to start writing again and then wait to be let back into the waiting room to hear what the editors or agents are going to say about the manuscript. So I guess my lesson there is, keep writing. If you feel like you're in the waiting room, get your laptop out and do something with it. Don't just think that you're going to be, scooped into fame. No matter what level of fame that you have as a writer, you're still going to be having to write books. Other people aren't going to be doing it for you. So get out your laptop and keep working.